Well, there's a very common theme throughout almost all of the Arab world, and that's a huge gap between the regimes and the societies that they're claiming to lead or represent. That's pretty much common. That was certainly the case in Egypt prior to January 25th, 2011, and it's very much the case in Libya as well. I think the critical difference is that Egypt is a relatively homogeneous and unified society, and it's a state that has very strong institutions. You remove the person at the top, and the state still can kind of function. Libya is a much more disparate society. It's much more geographically dispersed, and the institutions are far, far weaker. So that when you have political upheaval in Libya, what you're seeing is institutional decay, civil war. In Egypt, what you saw was quick regime change. Libya and Syria look a little bit more similar in the sense that the societies are fairly divided. I mean, in Libya they break down primarily on geographical grounds. In Syria it's a little bit geography and it's a little bit sectarian issues as well. Syria also probably has, it's a little bit more like Libya in the sense that both of them were very, very close political systems. Of course, there really isn't a functioning democracy in the Arab world right now, but in Egypt there was a little bit of room for maneuver and there was a lot of room for expression. That didn't exist in Syria or Libya either. And so I think one of the reasons why you're seeing kind of prolonged political crisis rather than sort of quick change at the top in both Syria and Libya is that you didn't really have much of a chance to organize politically, to sort of explore ideas. And the opposition itself is kind of inchoate, and the population that is seeking to lead is not really all that united. Well, Osama bin Laden is certainly a controversial figure in the Middle East. There are very few enthusiastic supporters. There are some. There are a lot of people who find his message, his tactics, his overall ideology abhorrent. And there were also some people who sort of fell between those two camps. There was almost a measure of vindictiveness on the part, I think, of some people, thinking essentially, what we've got is a world where Americans make the rules and we pay the consequences. And here's somebody who's finally making Americans pay consequences. There was an anger, not a very strong ideological support, but just kind of an anger. And Osama bin Laden, when he began, was expert at kind of tapping into that feeling. People who wouldn't necessarily agree with a fairly extreme reading of the tenets of the Islamic religion, people who wouldn't necessarily agree with that at all, but who could still say, okay, here's at least somebody who's doing something, even if what he's doing seems very extreme. That feeling has receded. That, I think, over the last decade or so, basically in the 10 years since 9/11, what has happened is that message just resonates an awful lot less. What we're seeing over the past year or so is really a focus on internal issues in most of these societies. Osama bin Laden's message always went something like this: we've got deep problems in the Islamic world. You can try to solve those problems in your own individual society, and you're not going to be able to, because you're led by dictatorial rulers, and those dictatorial rulers are in turn backed by the United States and by the West. Instead of trying to fix problems piecemeal on a country-by-country basis, let's take the battle to the source. We get the United States out of the region, and then we can move forward. That message doesn't make sense right now. Hosni Mubarak just fell. Zain al-Abidin bin Ali in Tunisia fell. And they fell, and the United States was powerless to do anything about it, in spite of the fact that they had good relationships with them. So the message to the region seems to be, take matters in your own hands. Don't worry about the Americans. The Americans will do what they're going to do, but you can still do what you want to do in your own society. I think we're seeing a region that is really, as I say, inwardly looking right now, and is really focusing on domestic issues, on issues essentially of governance, of trying to build political systems that are able to lead the societies and represent the societies. In a sense, the strong consensus in most societies in the region seems to be politics isn't working for us, and the reason it's not working for us, or a necessary condition to make it work for us, is to get our own domestic political systems right.